If you are a DNS administrator for Server 2016, then you may be aware that this list of resource records that we see here may be stored in what is known as a traditional zone file of the primary and secondary variants, or that if this server, named Storage 205 in this case, happens to be a domain controller and participate in Active Directory domain services, then the same replication technology that allows one domain controller, which houses a user account, to replicate the properties of that user account to another domain controller, Active Directory replication, can also be used as a conveyance mechanism for DNS records, for DNS resource records and zone information to other domain controllers that also run the DNS service. This is interesting because our older kind of standard RFC-based protocol for DNS says that there is a primary zone and then there are one or more secondary read-only zones. But in the case of Active Directory replication, we take that model away and we have instead multi-master primary zones. Each server that is running as a domain controller and running the DNS service can house a zone in the Active Directory database, and all servers may allow for edits to those records. Now, in terms of management, it's very much the same, but if we look at the properties of a particular zone, we'll see that instead of being of a type primary or secondary, it has been flagged as Active Directory integrated. And all Active Directory integrated function as primaries in the sense that they are read-write copies of the DNS zone. But they're not maintained in the text zone file. You won't find them anywhere in the DNS folder. Instead, they're only going to exist in the stored contents of the Active Directory database. So how would we start this process? Well, we could take an existing zone, like this Brocadero zone, for example, and if we want it to be conveyed in this multi-master method through Active Directory, we can simply go to its properties and change its type. When we see this check mark here that says store the zone in Active Directory, it tells you, if it's lit up and unavailable, that this system must be a domain controller. This would be grayed out if it's unavailable. So I can take this and essentially remove it from being stored as a text file, which would be a standard primary zone, and change it to being an Active Directory integrated zone. And it says, are you sure? Are you sure you're sure? And I say, yeah, of course I am. But then there will be a secondary question to consider, and that is the form of replication that is going to be used with this. When we store things in Active Directory, we have to choose which domain controllers should replicate this DNS zone information. And we've got several options. So if we have a multi-domain forest, then we have to consider the domain controllers that run within a particular domain